Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast, where we are here every week working at simplifying things in our lives, one day at a time, one simple step at a time. And together, guys, we are doing this. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and this season we are focusing on ingredients that we can't ignore. Today, it's veggies, but not just any veggies. These are veggies absolutely everybody can grow themselves fresh daily, no matter where you live, no matter what season it is. It sounds too good to be true, right? Um, if you recall back in our last season, episode 8 of season 5, Dr. Jamie was our guest. And first of all, it's a fascinating talk. If you haven't listened, definitely go give it a listen. Season 5, episode 8. Dr. Jamie is a naturopath doctor and a nutritionist. And one thing that she focused on in our talk that she really drove home was the fact that we should be eating a minimum of 50% of veggies. When we look at our plate for any meal, half of it or more should be veggies. And go listen to that episode to find out more about the why. Like I said, it's fascinating, but it seems so intimidating and it seems almost impossible to eat that many veggies. But if you think that, stick with me today because Doug Evans is going to completely change your mind. And it's fascinating how with sprouts, we really can not only eat 50%, but if you want to go all in like Doug, you can literally eat 100% veggies by simply growing your own sprouts. It's amazing. Before I tell you a little bit about Doug, although you've probably already heard of him and you know a lot about him already, but in case you don't, I'm going to fill you in on who Doug Evans is before bringing him on. But before that, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored absolutely perfectly by True Leaf Market. They are my number one source for sprout seeds. They have an amazing selection. They are high quality sprout seeds at a great price, and the variety is amazing. I mean, there's really no need to go anywhere else if you're looking for sprout seeds. And because they're awesome, they have offered you guys a special offer of code SR10 for Solely Rested 10, SR10. Also, if you go to solelyrested.com/seeds, you can find out why I love True Leaf Market and all of the amazing things that I will always go to them for, not just my sprout seeds and my sprout garden. Love my sprout garden. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. So thank you to True Leaf for sponsoring this episode. Now for Doug. Doug is the author of the national bestseller. Like if you haven't heard of this book, you have been under a little bit of a rock. The Sprout Book is the title. It is the book on the power of sprouts as an ultra food for health, weight loss, and optimum nutrition. Doug is a pioneer in the natural food industry. In 2002, he founded or co-founded Organic Avenue, which is one of the first exclusively raw, organic, plant-based retail chains in the country. He then created and founded Juicero, which is the first fresh farm to glass automatic cold press juicer. And his mission was bringing more fresh produce into everyone's kitchen. Doug lives in the Mojave Desert, and he wrote the Sprout Book in efforts to teach people about the power of sprouts and has written a transformative plan for sprouting. He's revolutionizing gardening and growing your own food right in your kitchen in an affordable, accessible way. His mission in life is to help people learn to grow and eat the most nutritious food on the planet, which is sprouts. Now, stick with me to the end because, first of all, there's some fun rapid fire questions that I throw at Doug, and he has some fun answers. And then I do want to give you some insights into lots of ways you can use sprouts because I know a lot of people get really hung up on that. Like, well, how much can you really do with it other than put it on your salad? I'm going to give you 15 ways that you can enjoy sprouts daily. And I'm also going to fill you in on the 5 rules of sprouts. I say rules with air quotes because um, it's really simple, trust me, but just 5 things to know if this is something new to you. And is that everything else that I want to cover at the end? I think so. So let's dive into this conversation because Doug is fascinating to talk to on this topic. Actually, no, wait. There's one more thing I want to tell you before Doug joins us. If you really do want to know about sprouts, the best resource that I can offer you is simply a set of emails that I put together, an e-course about sprouting. And it's super easy to dive into it. Just go to solelyrested.com/sprouts, SPROUTS, solelyrested.com/sprouts. It's just a few days worth of emails in a concise course that gives you so much information about growing sprouts. You really want this. solelyrested.com/sprouts. Thanks so much, Doug, for joining me today. I'm excited to talk about sprouts today because I think they're not only fascinating, but so super nutritious. And for me, the best part is absolutely anybody can grow these veggies anywhere. Like you prove that, right? Growing them in the desert, even. So, so let's start with just convince anybody who might just be listening in and not sure if they want to actually listen to the whole episode. Why sprout? Why should anybody even consider growing sprouts?
So, look, Michelle, I'm an everyday New York guy, went to high school, joined the military at age 17, ate processed food, meat, dairy, animal products, fast food, until
Yep.
I had my kind of come to cucumber moment back in 1999. And then sprouts have been part of my journey for over 25 years, but I always thought of sprouts as a garnish, something to put on a sandwich or a wrap or a soup or just like a snack.
Yeah.
And then
And I'll be
five,
honest with you, Doug, that's still where I am. I love them as a garnish, but you go all out. I mean, so
well, it was necessity for me because I
yeah.
moved in 2018. I moved to the Mojave Desert. I moved to Wonder Valley Hot Springs. And I just loved the desert. I loved the dark sky. I mean, I just was hanging out with a
You mean the
wild,
night sky?
the night sky. Yeah.
It's gorgeous here in New Hampshire too. The stars that I could never see when I lived in the Mideast like area, I just in the mid-Atlantic area, but it's gorgeous. I can't imagine the stars out in the desert.
It's unbelievable. Like people come from all over the world to watch the Perseid meteor shower, to
Yeah.
sit in the hot springs, all
Mm,
night watching. And there's like literally during the meteor shower, you could see a shooting star every minute.
wow.
So imagine seeing 100 shooting stars within 1 hour period.
Gorgeous.
So I moved
So,
here, and then I realized for the first time I had no access to fresh food. There was no health food stores, no organic markets, no restaurants, um, and not even a farmer's market in this little town that I moved to. So
right.
that's when I was having this existential food crisis.
Hmm.
And so you ask the right questions, you get the right answers. And the answer was, oh, grow your own food. But if you realize to grow your own food anywhere is difficult, to grow it in the desert, much more difficult. And it could take weeks or months or years to grow edible food in the desert.
Right.
And then I said, well, what about sprouts? And within a month, I was growing let me repeat, all 100% of my food was being grown in 1 cubic foot using 6 glass jars.
Wow.
And 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 the power of the sprouts under the necessity of that was you can take seeds, you put them in a jar, you soak them overnight, and then you rinse them twice a day. And when you soak and the seeds, you're doubling, and as they're sprouting, you double the antioxidant levels, you triple the vitamin C, and you quadruple the soluble and insoluble fiber. So it's unbelievable that they can increase their dry mass 10 times in under a week. And it's doing that without soil, without sunshine,
Right.
without fertilizer. And so how is this? So there's these, every single seed is a complete living organism in a
Yeah.
dormant state. And by soaking them, the water molecules are penetrating through the testa, the shell, and it's activating this dormant, sleeping, magical seed, and then it starts to germinate and sprout. And so when I look at sprouts today, yeah, they're nice as a garnish, but to me, they are the center of my plate. They are the vegetable replacement. Like I don't have to buy salad mix anymore because sprouts are the center of the plate. I don't buy protein powders anymore because the legume sprouts, the garbanzo beans, the mung beans, the soy sprouts, the lentils are incredible source of protein ranging between 8 grams and 20 grams, in
Wow.
one cup, one serving. And
Wow.
so the third thing, which really blew my mind, was the medicinal properties of sprouts. That the
Yes.
sprouts now have been proven to have anti-cancer compounds in them. They can regulate insulin levels in diabetics. They're obviously the number one weight loss food because they are
Yeah.
high fiber, low calorie, low fat. So the ability to get super, fit by eating sprouts, like you cannot overeat sprouts,
Yeah.
right? You'll fill up and you'll burn off the calories that you'll just do fine. So to me,
So it's
sprouts
a
are
food that you can literally eat mindlessly and not have any guilt or worry. You can just keep on eating the sprouts.
enthusiastically like it's the more sprouts you eat, the healthier you will become.
Hmm.
And with that information, I thought that maybe sprouts were a mirage for me, that maybe I was delusional, maybe it was too good to be true. So I reached out to Dr. Oz, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Josh Axe, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Joel Kahn.
You're naming
And
them all.
right. And,
Yeah.
and what happened, really interesting, as I'm speaking to these people, Dr. Axe wrote the keto book, right? Dr. Oz is mainstream. Dr. Joel Furman has nutritarian diet, right? So they all have different, Dr. Dean Ornish, reversing heart disease with plant-based diet. So they all had different ideologies. They wrote different books, but the thing that they had in common, they all loved sprouts.
Hmm.
None of them were going to devote their lives to sprouts,
Right.
but they would contribute a part of their life by supporting me in my mission to being the megaphone for sprouts.
Yeah.
So,
And that's a great point because I don't think, honestly, Doug, many people are going to do what you're doing because people just love more variety, I think, than that. And they want to have their steak and their potatoes. But but it's a great point you're making that all of these doctors, so many medical experts are on board, whether you're just using it as a garnish or you're going to go halfway to what Doug's doing or you're going to go all in. They're a really great thing. And nobody should ignore sprouts. Now, you
yeah,
had mentioned you're talking about the medicinal thing, and I have heard you talk a few different times. I think it's fascinating. If you could explain to me, you had talked about in a few interviews I watched how the plant literally has a defense mechanism that then is what becomes medicinal for us, and it creates something called sulfur. Is it sulforaphane?
sulforaphane.
Okay, can you explain that to me? Do you know? I'm
Yeah,
sure you know what I'm talking about as I'm trying to
sure.
explain it.
So nature is genius, right? And all of life on this planet that has made it to this point has adapted, right? And since the plants have such goodness in it, there are predators for the plants, which are insects. So in order for the plants to defend themselves against the insect, because it's not like they can swipe them away, right? For them to
Right.
defend themselves against the insect, what they do is if the plant feels a vulnerability, right? Like a little insect bite goes through it, it actually opens up two vacuoles inside the cellular structure, inside the cytoplasm of the plant, and then they mix. And then they form something that becomes toxic to the insect.
Okay.
So the insect can take a bite and it's okay, but if they bite again and they mix it, it breaks through. So it's well known that cruciferous vegetables have these anti-cancer compounds, right? They're isothiocyanates, they're glucosinolates. The specific compound in the broccoli sprouts is called glucoraphanin. And then there's also an enzyme called myrosinase. And that enzyme myrosinase also exists in our stomach, but it
Hmm.
exists in the plant. And
Okay.
when you chew, freeze, juice, it mixes those two vacuoles together, and the combination of the glucoraphanin and the enzyme myrosinase form sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is a very fast acting compound. And that compound actually will ward off an insect, will kill a cancer cell, will create a hermetic effect in the human body, which will create a heat shock protein in the brain. So
Wow.
there's all of this magic that's going on in these little things. And what happens is that all cruciferous vegetables have trace amounts of this. So the research done by Dr. Jed Fahey and Paul Talley 25 years ago at Johns Hopkins University were studying all cruciferous vegetables, and they concluded broccoli has the most of this, right? And then they were looking for which type of broccoli had the most of it. And it turns out it wasn't the type or the varietal of the broccoli, it was the
Yeah.
stage. And the
Yeah.
most was in the seed. But turns out the seed has enzyme inhibitors, trypsins, phytic acids, lectins that actually make it not so bioavailable.
Hmm.
But if you soak it, germinate, and sprout it for, say, 3 days, you are going through this metamorphosis from a seed into a vegetable that's then bioavailable. And
And it's
so,
exactly the amount of time that you're going to sprout your broccoli. It's just amazing.
yeah. So it all works out. And so I think that, if Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, he must have been talking about sprouts, right? He must have been. And there's no coincidence that Hippocrates Health Center in West Palm Beach serves at their salad bar 12 to 20 different types of sprouts every
Wow.
day,
Wow.
right? Like they know. So
Yeah.
this is, the why on sprouts for me.
Yeah. Hi, guys. I am interrupting for just a minute to tell you I'm so excited. I ordered broccoli sprout seeds just last week. But what I'm really excited about is the source where I ordered them from. I'm actually getting my sprouts directly from the food supplier because that's what Azure Standard is all about. And that's where I found my sprout seeds. Azure is an independent food supply chain that connects the food supplier directly to the consumer. But on top of that, they hold their products and their suppliers to a really high standard. They only offer real food with natural ingredients and no junk, and they are sticklers about it. So I know when I'm purchasing from them, I'm getting truly good quality food. And they are our sponsor this season. I'm so elated that they wanted to meet you, my audience, by being sponsors. And I talk about them all the time. I love Azure Standard. So this was a no brainer for me. Um, but they've removed so many levels of cost, storage, and labor with the way that they run their whole independent food supply chain that their prices can actually not be beat. I have never gone to do price checking and found that their prices are not the best. So they have top quality, real food. They have options to buy many of the items in bulk, and they genuinely have solid pricing. So go order yourself some sprout seeds or whatever else tickles your fancy. Just go to solelyrested.com/Azure, Azure. And I've listed a few of my top picks there. And I'm placing a discount code there because they want to give you 10% off your entire order to all new customers. And there's also a link there that's going to help you figure out how to order and where the nearest drop is to you. So go check out solelyrested.com/Azure. Okay. So sprouts, you mentioned there's absolutely no dirt, not even any sunshine. The difference with microgreens, tell me if I'm wrong, is microgreens, you need dirt and they have to grow longer, right? What's the difference between sprouts
Well,
and
microgreens don't necessarily need dirt, but they do need a sprouting medium. And in
okay.
the Sprout book, the best-selling vegetarian book, vegan book, growing book on Amazon, we talk about you could grow on an unbleached paper towel. You could
Hmm.
grow on coconut fiber, on jute fiber, on hemp fiber, and then the roots will go into the fiber or the soil, and the shoots will go up. So
Okay.
the primary difference, and by the way, I love microgreens, right? I
Okay.
grow microgreens too.
Hmm.
The main difference is the sprouts will grow without a sprouting medium, and they will grow in a fraction of the time of the microgreens. And obviously, they're less water than a microgreen. And when you consume the sprout, unlike almost anything else that we get to eat, you are consuming the true whole food, the root, the shoot, the endosperm, the
Right.
embryo, the testa,
Everything.
everything. With the microgreens, you're consuming above the fold. Like you're cutting,
Okay. Because you cut them off. Right.
right?
Okay.
So you're getting the shoot. And as you know, whether it's burdock or carrot or beet, like the roots are incredible. Like even,
Yeah.
with psilocybin in the US, people are eating the stem and the button of the mushroom. In Europe, like in Amsterdam, they're serving the truffle, right, which is below the ground part. So the roots are really, really powerful. And with a sprout, you get to eat it all.
Right. So why do you also grow microgreens? Because I've always thought sprouts are superior.
I grow microgreens because certain varietals, like pea shoots or sunflower seeds, um, it's easier to grow them because of like the sunflower seed. You can eat the shell, pretty gnarly,
Yeah.
right? The black sunflower seed shell is gnarly. And when you use the jar method for growing the sunflower sprouts,
Hmm.
you have to literally by hand remove every single shell and every
Oh,
seed. So
okay.
in that case, it's actually easier to grow it in the tray, and they'll also grow for longer. And so they'll taste different. They're definitely microgreens are more like familiar miniature vegetables that people are accustomed to,
Right.
whereas the sprouts are this like super potent kind of foreign being to most people. It's like they don't know what it is,
Right.
right?
But it's
So,
funny, as soon as you do it just a few times, you realize there's nothing weird about it and they're really good.
well, look, in Japan, like they're selling broccoli sprouts in the equivalent of 7-Elevens. So in convenience stores where
Really?
they're selling broccoli sprouts in
Huh.
well over 20,000 stores across Japan are selling
Wow.
broccoli sprouts. And so
Wow.
so the servings are upwards to 100,000 to 200,000 servings of broccoli sprouts a day. And
Wow.
in the US, it's interesting. There are no national sprouting companies. There are no international sprouting companies because of the short shelf life and the transportation of
Right.
the sprouts, which is mostly water, which require refrigeration that have a short shelf life. So sprouts have been relegated to a local or regional business. And that's where the big idea here is to get everyone sprouting wherever they are, because you could ship seeds. And I just want to encourage people, sign up for my free newsletter at thesproutbook.com.
Definitely.
My book is on sale on Amazon right now for $12. Uh,
Really?
yeah, and if you're a Prime member, it's free shipping.
Yep.
So, and that book was the most difficult thing I ever did in my life,
Mm,
right? 288 words, 60,000 words, 288 pages,
right.
40 recipes. And, up until it was done, literally, like within days before submitting the manuscript, I was ready to like send back the advance and tell them, oh, I just don't want to do it, because it was so difficult to write the book. But my mindset, because I was powered by sprouts in my brain, in my gut, in my heart, I had to finish it. But there
Hmm.
was so much resistance because it was so hard to do. And there was a lot of work around sprouts, like Ann Wigmore and Steve Meyerowitz and Viktoras Kovinskis, and David Wolf. These people had been talking about sprouts, writing about sprouts for a long time. They just didn't have, they're not around, they're not active, and they didn't have, the timing where they could I put up a video on TikTok under my Sprout Whiz, nom de plume, and it get 5 million views, right? So they didn't have that force of social media and
Right.
podcasts. So now uh, there's so much momentum about sharing this message that people are sprouting all over the world.
Yeah.
And the excitement, the passion. And look, you and I agree about sprouts. And then the rest, from there we veer off in many different, directions.
Right.
But what I look at, and like my friend Ben Greenfield, right?
Hmm.
He shoots elk with a bow and arrow, right? I don't shoot anything, right? If I
Well, I
said
know
that,
when I reached out to you, I said, just so you know, Doug, like just full disclosure, we're pig farmers. Like if you don't want to come on the podcast, I understand because I know that.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really hard because like I love pigs, right? Like I
Hmm.
love pigs. I mean, they're the sweetest. My friend Red Foo has a rescue pig and 2 rescue cows. And
Okay.
that pig, has a personality.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
friendly, it communicates, mostly that it's hungry, right? But it has a real personality,
Yeah.
and it's distinctive. Like it's you wouldn't confuse his pig with another pig, because that pig is so distinct. And his cows play with the dogs.
Yeah.
So, for me, and actually Red Foo is going to start, rather than feeding alfalfa and Bermuda hay to the cows, he's going to start sprouting and feeding
Really?
cows fresh sprouts.
That's a lot of sprouts.
Yeah. Yeah. He goes through like a bush, like a bale of hay every few days for them.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna set up some major sprouting systems, and we're
Yeah.
gonna see some
That's
super
fascinating.
happy, super happy um, cows and pigs. But if you think about this, alfalfa hay is what they feed to a 1,000 pound horse. alfalfa sprout is what they feed to, to humans. And the bioavailability and the tenderness of the soluble and insoluble fiber is just so magnificent, so easily absorbed, such a phenomenal prebiotic that
Yeah.
that knowing about it and not doing it seems unconscionable.
I actually have some alfalfa seeds right here. I
I,
figured, why not do some show and tell? I grabbed some of my favorite sprouts and I thought I'd ask you, what are most common, typical things to sprout? So I have some alfalfa, I have some pea seeds. This one
good.
is one of my favorites. It's a lentil fest. So it's like 4 different kind of lentils in one. This one is just one kind of lentil. How boring, right? And then protein powerhouse. This one has 3 different kinds of beans, including mung and
That's
garbanzo and some peas. So this is like a nice combination. And then I just have some garbanzo beans. I like these just for snacking. I heard you say something recently about garbanzo beans. Tell us, instead of popcorn?
yeah, you like if you take garbanzo beans, you soak them overnight, you rinse them twice, and then like on day 2, day 3,
Right.
you put them in the refrigerator, let them dry off. Then you could sprinkle uh nutritional yeast on them,
Yep.
and they literally taste like a cheesy popcorn.
I love it. So like day 3, they're just starting to kind of open up with a little bit of like what I call a tail,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that on the garbanzo beans, um, they're probably best at day 3. That
Mhm.
after, day 3 or 4, unless you have perfect conditions and you're well skilled, they can get slimy. And
Yes.
when I have slimy,
Can you
slimy,
still eat them? When I've had them go slimy, I give them to the pigs, honestly. Or the
yeah,
chickens. The chickens love them.
yeah. So you prefer like you want your sprouts to be fresh. So
Yeah.
slimy, mealy,
Yeah.
discoloration, smelly. Give them to the pigs.
Okay. Okay. So let's get into the details. If somebody has never sprouted, what kind of tools do we need? That's something else I love about sprouts. You really need very little, right?
Yeah. I think the number one thing you need my book is great. It's basically
Yes, that
the
should be the
captain's
number one
guide.
tool.
Yeah. So to have, and then there's a chapter in my book called Junkyard Dog, where you could basically take things that you have in the house, in the recycling bin, in the garbage, sanitize them, sterilize them, etc., and they could become sprouting. So the most provincial way of sprouting for the last few hundred years was with a mason jar or even uh, a pasta container with
Mm-hmm.
like the stainless steel screen lid that you have there, or
Yep.
cheesecloth, or they make a plastic lid. And that's really it. And then you could use a bowl, or you've seen me, I use a dish tray.
Yep.
Um, and that's it.
And
And then
prop it
you
up.
want to use the best water that you have access to, right? The best water you have access to. So if you have spring
Okay.
water, it's nice. If you have distilled water, that's nice. Filtered water. But even if all you have is tap water, I would still use the tap water above not sprouting at all.
Okay. Okay. Good point. And then there's also, I get a lot of my seeds from True Leaf Market. I know I've heard you mention them before. I think they're a great source for sprout seeds. And they also have this is how I started with sprouts and I still use it often. It's called a sprout garden, where you just, have your tray and it has these tiny little holes that will drain your water so you can easily rinse them, shake them, and you can pile them up. So I like that I can have 3 trays going at once and they're all just in one pile on my counter. So my point is there's a lot of options, but you don't need the fancy things like you said.
No, I think that the number one thing you need is the desire for optimum health, the desire to
Great point.
feel good, the
Yeah.
desire to have sovereignty over the food that you consume. Like
Yeah.
that's what it's really about. Well, Michelle, I can't believe this was 30 minutes.
I know. It's crazy that talking about sprouts and time just gets lost.
Yeah, time. Well, I look, I hope, and we can do this again. And I encourage people, I'm on social media, Doug Evans on Instagram, Sprout
Yes.
Whiz on TikTok, and I've gone on lengthy podcasts. In
Yes.
October, I've got a master class coming out on
Oh,
one
fantastic.
commune. So if you go to commune.com/sprouts, um,
Okay.
that's coming out in October.
Awesome. We'll
And
put that
I
in the
think,
show notes.
yeah, and I think we're just at the beginning of a sprout revolution. Like
I agree.
I see people growing. If
I
you
agree.
are an indication of the openness to this, you know, ancient technology,
Hmm.
that we need to go no further. And like when we had the pandemic was going on and there was food shortages, like there was no shortage of sprouts. There was a shortage of
Yeah.
Kraft macaroni and cheese and Coca-Cola and
Well, I was
toilet
going
paper.
to say your book came out in 2020. Like, what perfect timing. People were realizing they wanted to have a little more control over their food because we saw the broken system and what was happening. So,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Okay, rapid fire, a couple questions for you. What is your favorite sprout snack? If you had to pick one you were snacking on,
Easiest thing is green peas, green
green
peas.
peas. How about what do you put on a traditional salad if you were having like a chef salad kind of thing? What sprout would you use?
Um, I'd use broccoli, alfalfa,
Okay. I love
radish.
alfalfa.
So those
Yeah,
are
radishes are a little
um,
too much for me sometimes. They're really taste.
yeah,
They're
just
woo.
no more than like 20%
Okay,
radish.
okay. And what about, do you put any in smoothies? Do you ever eat smoothies? What would be your favorite sprout to throw in
I
there?
don't like probably easy. The best blendable sprout is probably a chickpea sprouted garbanzo bean.
Okay, okay, good point. And in baking?
I out of my I'm raw.
Okay, okay. Do you have any baked recipes in the book?
No,
No,
no.
okay,
The,
okay,
the book is 40 recipes, all plant-based.
okay,
50% of the ingredients are sprouts.
okay, 50%. That's awesome. And do you have a pet? Do you have any?
Not presently. I
Okay,
live in
if you,
nature,
what's that?
but I live in nature, so I have a lot of wild
Yep,
animals
yep.
around. But
If
I
you
would
had a
say
dog, would you feed them
broccoli.
sprouts?
Yeah, definitely.
Broccoli. Okay.
Broccoli sprouts, chickpea sprouts. Sprouts are vegetables and dogs are omnivorous. So,
Yeah.
you can they like it.
My dogs love actual broccoli. I feed them the stems if I don't want to eat the whole stem. So I need to start feeding them my broccoli sprouts too. I love it. Well, thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Doug. This was so fun. And I'm going to go fill up my sprout garden now because I just want more sprouts.
Perfect. All right. Well, Michelle, you have the best day ever. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Thanks
And
for coming on, Doug.
pleasure. Bye-bye now.
Bye bye. I hope you guys loved picking Doug's brain as much as I did. I think it's an absolutely fascinating topic, but of everything we talked about, the thing that really gets me every time I hear him talk about it is how the plant has a defense mechanism that protects it from the insects that will harm it. But that very same mechanism is what makes the sprout so medicinal for us. God is just amazing in his creation. Like that when he created seeds and plants, like this was all part of his plan, that there would be this bi dual purpose thing in the plant that protects it and that protects us and helps us medicinally when we eat it. Just it's fascinating. It blows my mind, the mercy and goodness of God's creation. Just so crazy. Okay, so I promised you 15 ways to use sprouts. So I actually created a list that I'm going to read off because I wanted to make sure that I had 15. I probably could have made it 20 or 25, honestly, but this is a good start to because if you listen to this episode and you're like, okay, I've got to do this, like it's a no-brainer, right? I've got to start growing some sprouts. Then of course the next hurdle is what do I do with them? So here you go. You can add them to tossed salads. That's, of course, the number one way that everybody uses sprouts. Blend them into your smoothies. Add it to stir fry. It's really good in any Chinese meal that we make. It's really good to add some sprouts. Use them instead of celery in your tuna salad or in your chicken salad. Add as a crunchy topping on your soup Or ones like mung bean or lentil sprouts can go directly in your soup and mix them in right before you serve them. You can add the smaller sprouts like alfalfa and clover sprouts into potato cakes, which, if you don't make potato cakes, you need to find out how to make them because they are my family's favorite thing that I do with leftover mashed potatoes. So you just add in some of those delicate sprouts. So good. Add them into scrambled eggs. I do that all the time. Sprinkle them on top of your over easy eggs. And it's really a nice little crunch the way that it adds that to it. I don't eat things like coleslaw or potato salad, but I figured I should add that to my list because I know probably most of my listeners do. I just have never been a fan of either of those things. I don't know. But sprouts, from what I'm told, are fantastic to add into both of those delicacies. Any kind of a rice dish, they add in so nicely. And any of these things, by the way, you want to toss it in right before serving. If it's something like scrambled eggs that you're heating up, you don't want to heat up the sprouts because that reduces the nutritional benefit. You want to eat them raw. So toss them in to your eggs or your soup or your rice dish right before serving. So that's 12 so far. Next is mix it into your spaghetti sauce right before serving it. Use it as an edible garnish. I know that Doug, kind of almost made fun of that people think of sprouts as a garnish, but hey, they are a garnish. So it's on my list. And number 15, just pop them in your mouth. I love what he does with garbanzo beans in place of popcorn. I'm a popcorn fanatic. I love popcorn. So I have not yet tried his take of garbanzo beans in place of popcorn, but I'm going to try it this week and I will keep you posted over on Instagram because I need to do this. Okay, the 5 rules, air quotes, of sprouts. First of all, you need to be sure to rinse them at least a couple times a day, every day. It's okay if you're not religious about setting a timer and doing it at a certain time every day, but just make sure at least a couple times a day you're rinsing them. And you do need to keep them moist, but you don't want them to be wet. That's why I showed my sprout tray. Let me grab it here. And they're great because they have these minuscule, if you're on YouTube, you can see these minuscule little holes that are not big enough for the sprouts to escape, but the water can always drain. So you put your sprouts in here, you add your water, and you give it a nice shake, and that's going to get the sprouts all moist, but the excess water is going to come out the bottom of the tray. Same idea if you're using a mason jar with a special sprouting lid like this one that I'm showing again on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, maybe I should describe it just briefly. The trays are, let me get the other part here. They work in tandem together. So you have a base and you have your sprout tray. And then you can put another base on top and another sprout tray like this. So you're keeping your sprouts dark as they should be, but you're also letting the moisture drain off. And then there's crevices in this lid, if that's what I want to call it, that will hold your excess water. So you can pile this up. You can even get a couple of them and pile it up 6 high. It only takes up 10 inches around in a corner on your kitchen counter, but you can have 3 or 6, lots of different sprouts growing in your tray at all the time. So that's one way that you can make sure you're keeping them moist, but you don't want them to be sitting in the water and getting wet too much. So rule number 3, try to keep them at a stable room temperature whenever possible. So ideally they say 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not always the case for me for different reasons and different seasons. But if you have a place in your home that you can keep around 72 degrees and keep the temperature consistent, that's the ideal conditions for sprouts. But don't let it deter you. Like Doug said, if all you have is tap water, don't let that stop you from, growing your sprouts. Use your tap water. If you don't have absolute ideal conditions, don't let that stop you from growing sprouts. They're amazing nutritional additions to your diet. Don't let, that 72-degree thing worry you. The 4th rule, give your sprouts plenty of room to breathe and don't put too many in your jar or in your tray. I sometimes will see people have a jar just loaded up with sprouts, and I always wonder how that works because there's going to be too much moisture built up in the center of the jar, and there isn't going to be any room for the ones in the center to breathe, which is why I love my sprout garden, because with this tray, they have the whole surface of the tray to spread out, and there's always room for the sprouts to breathe. And the fifth rule, keep the sprouts covered and away from light. So it's that simple. I kind of hesitated, like I said in the beginning, calling them rules even because I don't want it to sound intimidating. But I think if you're just starting out, it's good to know, okay, these are the things I need to understand. And then it's so easy. I do have a few questions that people will ask me that I jotted down so I would remember. People will ask, do they have to be special sprout seeds? Can I just use the seeds from my garden? Like I planted broccoli this year, I have extra seeds left over. Can I use those seeds to grow my broccoli sprouts? No. First of all, they cost so much more that way. Like you're not going to have too many extra broccoli seeds probably in your packet. That's not even going to be enough to make one tray full or jar full or serving of your sprouts. So it's much more expensive. But much more importantly than that, um, garden seeds are often treated with chemical fungicides and with like a mercury coating. So that can be highly toxic. That is not intended for you to soak in water and then eat. Um, Also, if garden seeds are imported, they actually are required to be dyed often for identification of where they're coming from. So you don't want that either. So stick with a good source of actual sprout seeds, not garden seeds. I know there are many. If you have a local source, that's ideal. Find that local source and use it for sure. But like I said, True Leaf is amazing. They have been in the sprout seed business for decades, maybe longer, and they're just a fantastic resource. And with the code SR10, 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 how should I say that? You can even get $10 off a $50 order. Go to solarest.com/seeds to find out more. Oh, the other thing is when we're talking about seeds, you might think that buying something in bulk, I mean, I often buy a lot of things in bulk, is always going to be best. That is not usually the case with sprouts because often the bulk suppliers um, are giving less than ideal seeds and they do not have a very good germination rate. That's one thing with True Leaf. Their seeds, their garden seeds, and their sprout seeds have amazing germination rates. But the bulk sprout seeds, if they do not have a really great germination rate, what happens is you have dud seeds sitting there in your tray or your jar, and they're actually going to ferment and turn bitter because they're not sprouting, they're just soaking in the water. And then they literally will make your whole jar, your whole tray taste off or bitter. So you don't want that. It is not a cost savings in the end. So do be careful about that. Um, what about some people will ask, okay, if I make too much and I just can't eat it all? First of all, go back to my list of 15 ways to use it because you shouldn't have extra sprouts. Um, but they will ask, can they freeze it? Unfortunately, no. Sprouts are not intended to freeze because they're frost sensitive. I mean, they're really delicate, brand new little tiny plants. They're not going to survive, and there will be no nutritional benefit whatsoever if you freeze them. But you can keep them in the refrigerator. You can keep them for at least a week, if not longer. I like to wrap a piece of paper towel, dry paper towel, around my sprouts in the container that I'm storing them in, and that will help them keep longer. People also say, I've never done this because I just have never needed to, but people say that if you take them out of the fridge and rinse them really well and then dry them off and put them back in every couple days, that extends the life of them even longer. So that's a possibility too. So is that all my questions I wanted to make sure I answered? Yes. Okay. So thanks for listening, guys. I hope that I inspired you to go try out some sprouts and add some amazing nutrition to your family's daily diet. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. If you liked hanging out with Doug and I, it would mean so much if you take a very quick second and leave a 5-star review over on Apple Podcast. It's really the number one way that you can help us encourage more people And that's the reason that we do what we do. So if you're not sure how to leave a review, go over to solelyrested.com/podcast for all the details. That's solelyrested.com/podcast. And I read every review. Everyone makes me smile. So I can't wait to see yours. Thanks for listening, friends. Remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. Even the really simple things like sprouts can make a world of difference in your day. Enjoy them. It's not easy, but it's a very good life.